All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our 2025 preview and prediction for the Washington Huskies. Looking at the staff, Jedd Fisch enters his second year in role of head coach. Jimmy Daugherty, he's been with Fisch since 2016. When he was in the college ranks, that is, his non-NFL stints, of course. Ryan Walters was fired after 2 years as a horrendous head coach for Purdue, but of course, he was an elite defensive coordinator for Illinois. They're hoping his expertise can have an impact on their defense. Pretty good offseason. Top 25 high school class, 40th in the portal. Went 6-7 last year, losing in the Sun Bowl in what was one of the top bowl games of the postseason. Get anything started with this offense, Nick? This is a group that was, not all that great last year in terms of scoring. 23 points per game isn't great, but they were able to generate some solid yards at time. Even that 100th in rushing yards per game, they still had a very good running back in Jonah Coleman. Let's start with him. This is a guy that followed Fisch over from Arizona, a guy with good balance. He can plant and hit the hole with a nice burst. Good hands out of the backfield. Showcased some great explosiveness in his career for being 5'9", 229. Strong after contact runner. He really improved as a pass blocker as well. This guy's going to be a big focal point, Nick. I think, at this moment in time in his career, he's a veteran. This is a guy you should be able to lean on for, 1,200 yards, 15 touchdowns. He darn near had those numbers last year. So even though they came in 100th in terms of rushing yards per game because he didn't get great help, that doesn't tell the full story. And I think this was actually a respectable run game with what he was able to provide.
I expect the Washington rushing attack to be a lot better this year. I think that's going to be because Jonah Coleman is going to carry the workload and be a strong workhorse for this offense. Over 1,000 yards rushing last year, 5.5 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns, and 81 yards per game on the ground for him. Also at 23 grabs for 175 yards in the passing game. Coleman is a really solid, shifty, speedy back who was really good at Arizona, was good last year at Washington. I think he'll be good this year as well. They were 100th in the nation last year in running the ball, which is certainly a poor stat, but he had nearly all their rush yard production per game, right? He had 81 yards per game. They had 128 yards per game. So he wasn't getting much help from the rest of his group behind him. He's got a decent group behind him this year, in my opinion, with some guys that have got a little bit of experience from last year that could certainly be better and help carry that load a little bit, as well as potentially from the quarterback, who we'll talk about in a second here. But I think Coleman will have a really strong season. I think 12 to 1,300 yards rushing is certainly in line for him this year. He's got really good footwork, high football IQ, and is a really solid back in this conference.
You look at this passing attack. Will Rogers, he was a respectable bridge quarterback, but now he's going to hand the keys off to DeMond Williams, and I absolutely love this kid. I think he's going to be a superstar. Really strong arm, showcases some velocity on throws on the run or when fading away, has really impressive accuracy. The downfield touch is on point. He's the definition of a dual-threat quarterback, as he has elite speed, really good quickness, does a good job evading pressure with his running skills. Again, this guy is going to be a superstar, Nick. I think he'll be a Heisman finalist. I have a lot of hype for this football team because I loved what I saw from him last year, and that includes an impressive performance in the bowl game. Made some good plays against Oregon as well, despite getting sacked, I think it was like 8+ times in that game. I think it was double figures, actually. I'll check up on that. But he was a battle-tested player. Still looked very good at the last 2 games of the season. Nick, DeMond Williams, remember that name. He's going to be a star.
Definitely remember the name. This is a kid that's a star in the making. I teased it in the previous thing I talked about, saying that, they'll get a little bit of help from their quarterback running the ball. I think that's certainly possible. DeMond Williams was good last year when he ran the ball. 83 attempts for 282 and 2 scores. He'll certainly be on the ground a lot this year. They'll use his legs in a variety of different ways to kind of get some wrinkles for opposing defenses. He was really good in his limited reps. 105 passes, 78% comp rate, 950 passing yards for him, 8 touchdowns to 1 pick. He was really solid protecting the ball here. I think when you look at that game, that aforementioned bowl game you mentioned, I know they lost it, but still 81% comp rate in that game, 375 yards passing, 4 touchdowns and 1 pick. He was just phenomenal that day, plus a rushing touchdown, 5 total touchdowns in a bowl game, a shootout against the Cardinals, a really good showing. Also at 200 yards against Oregon and a touchdown in that one with 85% comp rate. So he's a very accurate passer. This kid protects the ball, does not put it in harm's way. I would not be surprised at all if he does not turn the ball over more than 5-6 times this year. He's really accurate in that regard. I think he'll stand up in the pocket and be quite strong. Washington's in great hands with Williams at quarterback. This kid's going to be a household name come the end of the season, and he's only a sophomore, so he'll still get at least one more year of him. The sky's the limit with this prospect. I think he'll be really solid. I'm buying the stock now, just like you are. I think this is a a low risk, high reward prospect to invest in terms of looking at his talent. Such an incredible player who should have a great season here for the Washington Huskies.
And before Jedd Fisch came back to be the head coach at Arizona, he was always known as kind of a QB whisperer. So this is a guy that knows how to coach the position and put his players in position to succeed. So look at some of the weapons Williams have at his disposal. We'll talk about the other running backs here. Adam Muhammad was RB2 last year, saw the field every game as a freshman. He's a guy that followed Fish over from Arizona, so a player he views pretty highly. Redshirt freshman Jordan Washington only played in 2 games. He also came over from Arizona, smaller guy though at 5'11", 161. Great explosiveness and was a 4-star out of high school, so I think they have a good running back room. And then you start with Denzel Boston at the pass-catching group. This is a great player. He has great hands, contested catch artist, physical pass catcher who excels in man coverage, shows the ability to win as a vertical threat as well. 6'4", 210. You talk about household names, Boston. His respect is long overdue, Nick, and this fall he's going to get it. Kevin Green Jr., some good speed. He was an ex-4-star that also transferred in from Arizona. Didn't play last season, though, but they're hoping to get him on the field in some capacity. Amari Evans arrives from Penn State. He was a big play option for the Nittany Lions. Was not a consistent separator, though. Depth is very uncertain. Sophomore Audric Harris only seeing the field for a few reps last year. An ex-4-star and Rashid Williams, a physical guy that can handle press coverage very well. They also have 4 incoming freshmen in this class. Three of them from the state of California, the other coming from IMG Academy in Florida. So I think this is a good group here, Nick. Top heavy. I'm confident in some of the younger guys getting involved, though. What do you make of the rest of the supporting cast?
Yeah, I like a lot of the weapons that you have here. You talk about Adam Muhammad, who was solid as number 2 back, about 200 yards rushing last year. For him, unlimited attempts, 4.6 yards per attempt. He's a guy I think will be really solid. He's your number 2 back. Denzel Boston is a true number 1 wide receiver. He will certainly have a phenomenal season and be a strong piece for this offense. 835 yards receiving last year, 9 touchdowns, 64 yards per game. The only gripe maybe you want to have him was 13.2 yards per attempt. Maybe you want to get some more on yards per reception for him, but I still think that's not a bad number at all. He will be really solid for this team. He'll get a ton of targets. He'll certainly command those targets and be really good. Rashid Williams, I think, is a good player that they return, a younger guy who's got some experience, though. 138 yards receiving last year and a score for him. I think adding Evans at the wide receiver Z position from Penn State was a really solid add. 6 foot 190. I think he was good for that team. 415 and 5 scores, about 20 yards for grab for him. On limited touches, he should be really solid as a big play option downfield. Kevin Green in the slot, I think, is a reliable name you can certainly look at. And you look at the tight end as well, the younger player, Decker DeGraff, that is. He was a true freshman last year. He had 3 touchdowns in the red zone, 235 yards receiving, 15.5 yards per attempt at tight end. He'll certainly get some catches this year and be a big red zone option for them. This is a good passing attack with a really deep unit. I think some of the further depth maybe down the depth chart is concerning, but overall I like what they have here. They got a really good back and a really star wide receiver. It's really headlined by 3 players, a star quarterback, a star wide receiver, and a star running back. I really like what they have here.
Now that number I was thinking of earlier was 10. 10 sacks the offensive line allowed against Oregon at the end of the year. Overall, they ranked 121st in sacks allowed. They were very poor across the board. Left tackle gets a big boost, though, with the add of a transfer in Carver Willis from Kansas State. 6'5", 290. He's been a very respectable pass blocker in his career. Pika Fanau, 6'5", 300. A redshirt freshman's likely going to slot in at left guard. Michael Watkins, also a redshirt freshman, is going to be competing with him. At center, it's going to be occupied by Landon Hatchett, who played all 3 spots on the interior offensive line last year and wasn't all that good. He is 6'2", 310. There's valuable experience, though. Darian Hatchett returns to Seattle, spending last year at Oklahoma. He got hurt in week 1. He was solid for Washington back in 2023. Wasn't great, though, by any means. And, of course, that right tackle, they're going to get back Drew Azapardi, who was abysmal, one of the worst pass protectors in the conference. Maximus McCree was the main starting left tackle. He's still here on roster, but certainly struggled immensely. Other than that, depth is limited with some true freshmen and or sophomores on the 2 deep. So the starting lineup has a lot to work out, needs to stay healthy, Nick. Do you feel like they did enough in the offseason to address this, or are you going to just trust the coaching on this one?
I'm going to hope to trust the coaching here. I don't think they did enough out of the portal here. If you want to find a weakness on this offense, well, it's the offensive line. It's certainly a glaring one. It concerns me in the Big Ten when you get to play some of those bigger, tougher defenses that will certainly find a way to run over your offensive line and give you fits. They add Carver Willis from Kansas State. I think that was a solid add. I think his big frame will really work well. He should be good at left tackle, but I think they could have maybe done a little bit better there. Paka Fanau was not great at left guard. He's going to try to find a way to improve a little bit here. The 2 Hatchets, I thought Landon Hatchett was better. Landon Hatchett, that is. It was better at center. I think he's a really good player. They bring back the other Hatchet from Oklahoma. Can he find a way to get to his form that he had at Washington 2 years prior? I think that would certainly be good for them. And then their right tackle position is a mess between whoever you pick there. I don't really care who you pick. The right tackle is a very weak spot, and I'm concerned about that as well. I think it's a big issue, right? I think it's a really problematic part of this team. If there's going to be an issue this year, it's the offensive line. You got to find a way to protect your quarterback and give some running lanes for your star back and your quarterback who can run the ball effectively. I am quite concerned about that position. I think the offensive line group as a whole is weak, but I think the coaching could be solid here to help a little bit. But this is definitely a big worrisome for me. If you want to look at an issue here on this Washington team, it's got to be the offensive line for me.
Looking at the offensive verdict, the Huskies unit is really going to boom in 2025, as I think Damon Williams is going to be a superstar, and a supporting cast is vastly underrated, as Coleman in Boston helped form one of the best 300 monsters in college football. The offensive line, though, is still a work in progress, should improve, but to what degree, while a young quarterback still learns protections, pre-snap diagnosis, also needs some other pass catchers to be reliable as well. There's a lot to love here. The concerns could hold them back big time, Nick. I think you're going to see a lot of design QB runs and, a complex run game to try and loosen things up for the offensive line when it comes to being exposed, that is. B+ for me. They can obviously reach an A+. Washington a couple years ago, I know if a different staff, different group of players were an A+. That's not unheard of in Seattle, though, so I think the upside is incredibly high.
I think the upside is extremely high. We've seen these offenses in previous years for the Huskies, albeit under different staffs, be absolutely phenomenal and light up the scoreboard, particularly the one that went to the national title game and finished as runner-up. I don't think this offense is as good as that one is, but I think they have similar players at quarterback, wide receiver, and running back to that offense. That could be really solid here. I think Boston's just an absolutely incredible player. Going to be so strong at wide receiver. I think Damon Williams will be a household name come the end of the season. He is so talented at quarterback. And Jonah Coleman is a very reliable back, one of the top backs in the nation. The offensive line certainly worries me, and some of the depth at some of the other positions does as well. I think tight end will be really solid for them in the red zone. I think the wide receiver room still has a lot of key pieces. Amari Evans was a great add from Penn State, who I think will be really solid for this team. B+ for me right now, but this can certainly get to an A+ unit come the end of the season.
Now I move to the defensive side of the ball. This was a pretty solid unit last year under Stephen Belichick. Of course, he went off to North Carolina, and now they bring in Ryan Walters, and he's not getting any starters really back. Only one of them on this side of the ball, if that. Russell Davis starting on the defensive lines, a player I really like, despite being pretty undersized, 217 pounds as a DN. Plays the run well, had 3 sacks and 14 snaps against UCLA. Only played 34 snaps on the year due to injury, but he shows you his effectiveness right there. Of course, he was an Arizona import. Deshaun Lynch was a respectable performer in his near 300 snaps last year. Isaiah Ward was underwhelming coming over from Arizona, but is a quality veteran who will be a good contributor. Tatia Uyungale comes over from Arizona, 1,200 snaps over the last 3 years. Pretty poor tackler, but another solid guy they can have in the rotation. Zach Durfee only played 140 snaps himself across a couple games. He had 3 sacks against Eastern Michigan early in the year. That was it, though. Didn't see another one the rest of the season. Solid deep group here. It'll be interesting to see who breaks out, though, and what role under a new DC in the scheme. And, of course, let's focus on the interior. Javon Parker was really impressive versus the run last season in 4 games before he went down of an injury. He's 6'3", 297. He's the makings of being a standout, I'd say. Ontario Thompson, 300-plus pounder from Western Michigan. Wasn't all that good in nearly 500-plus reps for them, though. Elianias Davis, a 310-pounder, was pretty good in nearly 200 snaps as a freshman, on the other hand. Samonte Papa, 6'3", 332. I mean, that's absurd size. He was a good gap clogger in his 3 years for Utah. So I think this is a pretty good, solid D-line across the board. Got some good size, some nice rotation. Not exactly if the pass rush will take a leap forward, but I definitely think they'll be strong against the run, Nick. 9 of their 20 sacks last year came versus non-P4 opponents. They had 11 of them in conference play. 6 of them alone came against UCLA, so this pass rush was the worst in the country, quite frankly, last year.
This is a bad pass rush last year, and I'm not sure it's going to get that much better here. I think they have some solid pieces, but I'm curious to see if any of these guys can find a way to step up. Isaiah Ward, they need a lot more out of him. 28 total tackles, 6 sacks lost, 3 sacks, 2 pass breakups. He's got to be a lot better this year. Deshaun Lynch was solid for them at times, 21 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a sack for him. He's got to be better. Zach Dunfree, they move him around a little bit. He had limited reps, but he had some versatility, 16 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks for him. And Linus Davis had 14 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. They need more out of him. Javon Parker was good during the 4 games he played, 10 tackles for loss, 2 tackles for loss, that is, for him, plus a half a sack. He's going to be fully healthy this year. They'll hopefully get more out of him. Russell Davis is a really good player. If he can stay fully healthy, I think he'll be really good for this team. Uyungale from Arizona, that is an interesting add. I think he'll be solid for this team. 35 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 8 QB hurries last year for that team. I think he'll be really solid, and that was a decent add. He's got good size on him. Simonte Pepe was okay at times for Utah. Had 10 total tackles last year, two sacks there. Maybe that's a guy that you get some production out of. While Antonio Thompson from Western Michigan was not very good for the Broncos last year, 34 total tackles, but he did have 6 QB hurries and 2 pass breakups. He was a little bit better in some games in the second half of the season. Did have 5 tackles in the bowl game, so maybe Thompson can find a way to get that form fully lined up for a full season. This pass rush is weak. I do like some of the names they have here. Some of the guys could potentially add some nice production to their locker. They get back some guys who were hurt last year, but this is still a weak unit overall and one of the weaker ones in the conference.
Yeah, looking at the numbers right here, one more stat. 17 of the 20 sacks came in 5 games last year. The rest of them, they were pretty much silent. So that's awful, and that needs to be better. Moving to the middle of this defense, Tariq Al-Yukwada, a great ad from Wazoo as a 2-year starter. He was tremendous in coverage. Adequate run defender, had 76 tackles with 3 interceptions for the rivals over there in Pullman. Xari Robinson was a great ad from Ohio in 2023. Wasn't as polished this past season for UCF, but was pretty good versus the run. Underrated addition to this defense, Jacob Manu. He was a breakout star himself back in 23. Only played half the season last year due to injuries. Has improved a great deal versus the run and as a playmaker, though, in his career. They also have a redshirt sophomore in Devin Bryant, who hasn't played that much in his 2 seasons. Respectable linebacking group here, Nick. I like the additions in the portal. They go get one from a rival. They get a veteran that's been in a couple different schools, and then Manu makes his long-awaited arrival following over his ex-head coach. So I think there's a good amount of options here. I like the experience.
Yeah, I think there's some solid players here. The guy they added from Washington State, I think, is a really talented player. 76 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 5 QB hurries, 3 forced fumbles for him. He should be really solid this year. I think Zaire from Central Florida was really solid add as well. He grew up in the state of Washington, so it's good to get him back to the home state. 68 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hurries for him this past season for the Knights there. I think Manu is an incredible add. He was really good 2 years ago in 2023. 116 total tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks that year. 13 QB hurries as well. That's a really impressive number. Last year, he battled injuries, had 48 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, only played in a handful of games and has best production against an FCS team. But he did have 7 tackles against Texas Tech and 8 against Utah early in the season. So maybe some more production out of Manu, who's I think a really good veteran player from college football there. You know, a new look room, right, with 3 different transfers there. But I think these are 3 guys that have a lot of different upside. You steal one from your rival, you get another guy who's got good experience at the Power 4 level and at the FCS level, plus a guy in Jacob Manu who could be really good to get back to full level of full health there. I think this is a really strong linebacking core of transfers.
I move to the secondary. This was a team that was great against the pass last year, second nationally at that, and now they're able to pair up an old cornerback duo from Arizona back in 2023 as Tacario Davis, who spent last year in Tucson, now arrives in Seattle. Neither he or Ifasanis Prysock were as stout compared to 23 in 24, but they both shined in coverage 2 years ago, made lots of plays on the ball. Second string cornerback sitting on very limited snaps in redshirt sophomore Leroy Bryant and true freshman Dylan Robinson. Dyson McCutcheon saw the second most snaps of anyone in the slot last fall. Looks like he'll become the full-time starter in that role in 2025. The starting corners are good, but depth is quite limited. Now you look at the safety group. They return a great standout. Markel Esteen, shine versus the run, showed nice range in coverage. Only missed 3 tackles all year, nearly 400 snaps, so that's a pretty highly impressive mark. Alex McLaughlin, he was elite in 2 years for Northern Arizona, 6'2", 190. He was great in all areas for him. Also snagged CJ Christian, who was a 2-year starter at FIU, coming off his best season yet in both the run defense and coverage departments. Has been a pretty consistent coverage asset in his career. Has the versatility to play in the box. And then you have Vincent Holmes, who also saw some solid action last year in 9 games. I like the secondary. I think they can get back to being stout in man coverage and have plenty of versatility in the safety room. Walters had a dominant secondary in his last year at Illinois with a similar type of group. He's going to implement this 4-2-5, Nick. Reuniting those 2 guys in Davis and Prysock from Arizona, they were standouts 2 years ago, and I think you're going to see some of that magic recreated here.
Yeah, I like what they have here. I think Prysock's a really talented player. 45 total tackles for him last year, 6 pass breakups. He reunites with Davis, who was not as strong last year in coverage. He had 44 total tackles and 6 pass breakups. The year before that, he had 25 total tackles and 15 pass breakups. He's really good at it. He can get back to the full form there. I think CJ Christian was not a bad add from FIU. 80 total tackles last year, 3 pass breakups for him. Had a pick as well. He's a guy that's solid. Could be good for this program. Alex McLaughlin was really good at Northern Arizona. I think he's not a bad add at all at strong safety. Markel Esteen was really good for this team as well. He was a good key asset. 44 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss for him. He'll be involved in this defense, while Dyson McCutcheon was not bad either. 14 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss. He's a solid player. I like some of the depth here as well. I think Dylan Robinson, that true freshman, can certainly find a way to get involved and get some key reps, while Leroy Bryant is a younger player who could be involved as well. The secondary should be a really big strength for this team. They were pretty solid last year. Obviously, they were top 5 units, so they were really strong. They need to find a way to force some turnovers, maybe help out in the pass rush as well. But this is a team that could be really good here. I like what they get, bring in the portal to a new look unit. I think it'll be just as strong as some of the other units in the Big Ten, and will be one of the top units in the country.
I'm going to go with a B- overall. The Huskies defense was very quality last season, did struggle versus tougher opponents, mainly on the ground, along with a horrible pass rush. I think the D-line will showcase a much improved effort versus the run. I like the linebacking group. Really a fan of the secondary, but I don't anticipate that pass rush improving without getting risky and sending heat frequently. Good defense here. One that will be better. Is B- a little bit too harsh, Nick, because that pass rush is really the thing that's holding me back, but the run defense also needs to be better. It's too much for me to gamble just to assume that both are all of a sudden going to be significantly better.
Yeah, I think a B minus is fair considering where the state of the pass rush is, as well as some of the run defense there. I think it's certainly a concern, right? This team was 87th in the nation against the run last year. They got to be better than that. The secondary is phenomenal here. I think the new look linebacking core is pretty solid. I think the coaching will be solid. I think Ryan Walters is a solid DC who could really coach a defense. So I trust him to develop these guys. Got to find a way to get some more help on your pass rush. They have to get sacks this year. Maybe they'll come from other pieces on the defense. Maybe they'll find a way to scheme up things. I mean, I don't know if they want to send heat all the time there. They might want to be more liberal about that. So keep an eye on what this pass rush can do. It will certainly be a boom or bust thing for this team. If this pass rush is really strong, this team can go very far in the Big Ten. If this pass rush struggles, this team will be one of the teams that's in that middle of the pack in a crowded conference.
Now we look at the schedule and the prediction for Washington. I'm a big fan of this Husky squad. That's me putting a ton of stock into that big three on offense, led by Damon Williams, Coleman, and Denzel Boston. Let's not forget who the head coach of this team is. Jed Fish can do a lot with a little. And his lone strong year of Arizona is still fresh on my mind, Nick. It wasn't too long ago where he did a lot of good things with them. I think this defense still has some issues, like the pass rush. That run defense potentially doesn't progress like I imagine it will. And, of course, the offensive line's still quite poor. So there's a lot of holes that need to be plugged. I think this is a very manageable schedule, pretty favorable. Nearly all their toughest games come at home. And, again, this QB is going to be something special. I think he's going to be a Heisman finalist, a top 5, top 10 for sure. And again, Nick, I think there's a great opportunity. Week 4 against Ohio State. That's a team of a lot of issues. This is a rowdy home environment, especially if it's going to be a night game. I think they knock off Illinois, and I think they beat Oregon, which could potentially knock the Ducks out of the playoffs late in the year. That's not my prediction that it will happen. I think Oregon will still be in, but man, that's going to be flirting with danger there if you're the Ducks. I think Washington knocks them off 9-3 for me. It's possible they end up at 10 wins, Nick, and if they do, I think they'll be in the playoffs themselves.
I think if they get to 10 wins, they can find themselves in the playoffs. It's tough to play up at Husky Stadium in Seattle, a very tough, rowdy environment, one of the best environments in college football, a very underrated environment, I think, because most of the nation just is very far from the absolute northwest corner of our great nation. This is a great team, right? I think, Williams is a phenomenal quarterback who can really take that huge step and be great as a true sophomore. I think Denzel Boston will be a household name coming the end of the season. He's a phenomenal player, while Jonah Coleman really rounds out a three-headed monster. The secondary, I think, will be really good at adding some key pieces in the linebacking core while it's completely revamped with transfers, which I normally don't like. I think the 3 guys they added here are really solid, and I like the coaching they brought in as well. The 2 concerns for me, right, in the trenches on both sides of the ball, the O-line and the D-line. I think the O-line is the bigger concern. I think it's a group that's just not that polished and certainly a problem unit for me. The D-line I have higher faith in, but I still think it's a weaker unit in the conference, and they'll struggle against the run, and they'll certainly struggle to put pressure on the quarterback. Find a way to put pressure on the quarterback. Find a way to dial up some better pressure packages on defense and be strong in the pass protection and run protection as well. And this team could be a playoff team. The schedule cuts out pretty easily here for them. They get their rivalry game at Wazoo early in the season. That could be an interesting one. They host Ohio State early. They could maybe pull an upset there. They've beaten Oregon in previous years when they counted themselves out. Certainly possible they beat Oregon again this year. I'm not going to pull the trigger here. That's my 3rd loss. I think they will beat Wisconsin on November 8th on the road. This rest of the schedule, you get pretty easy wins at Maryland, at UCLA, at hosting Purdue. I think they beat Illinois as well. I think this is a really big opportunity for them to win that game and get a marquee win for this coaching staff. They should beat Rutgers as well. They'll struggle at Michigan. I think that's a tough one, certainly on the schedule. I don't think you're going to find a way to win that game. I think Michigan wins at home and gets by in that one. But this is a big opportunity for Jed Fish and company. I still like him as a head coach. I think he's a really good coach that's been around the game for a while despite being only 49 years old. He's got experience at multiple NFL teams and multiple college teams, so he's really been around and found a way to get some opportunities, and then obviously had that 2023 season at Arizona that was quite dynamite. Big things come for the Huskies this year. They'll certainly improve that win total and be one of the premier teams in this conference.
And the thing is about my 3 predicted losses is they can win every single one of those games, Nick, because they're going to have a better offense than Wisconsin and Michigan. I just think those rowdy environments, and of course the Wolverines' defense will be something that's going to be tough to contend with. And Ohio State's a winnable game, even though they're going to be one of the top rosters in America talent-wise. So if this QB is as good as I think he's going to be, they can go undefeated, quite frankly, Nick. I don't think that's too bold of a prediction one bit.
Yeah, I think if his quarterback plays the level that we're really expecting out of him, this team could be a potential 1-loss, 0-loss team come, Big Ten title game weekend. This is a team that can certainly contend in the conference. They find themselves in a very good position. Back when they made the national championship 2 years ago, a lot of people were high on the team, but they weren't that high. They were sleeping on the team a little bit there, and they found some mojo. Yes, it's a little bit easier in the Pac-12, but I still think this team can find a way to ride that wave of emotion, ride the crowd, ride the positive energy, ride the coaching, and find themselves in contention for a playoff spot.
That's me for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.